Welcome to the Stop Suffering in Silence podcast with your host, Denise Walsh and Rachel Timothy.
Hey, you guys, it's Denise Walsh here, back here at STOPSIS with co-host Rachel Timothy, and we are here for our 100th episode.
Yeah!
The crowd goes wild.
It's the best.
100 episodes.
That's insane.
That's, yeah. We've done a good job of being consistent, I have to say, I feel like.
Yeah, and we apparently like to talk.
We've got a lot to say about this topic.
We sure do. And it's been, we've had some tough conversations. We've cried, we've laughed, we've done it all.
We've done it all. And we've created a beautiful community.
Yeah.
Of people who are wanting to learn about trafficking and wanting to help, wanting to support survivors, wanting to heal from their own stuff, because we've all got stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a growth-focused community that wants to support and lock arms with each other. It's been really special.
It has. And I've absolutely loved doing it with you. I love it. I look forward to it each week.
Yeah. Well, this wouldn't have been birthed if it weren't for you. Your healing journey.
Well, and you too, but yes.
We both add something.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time that we were doing 90-Day U-Turn with a group of survivors, and you had so much to say. And I remember saying to you, oh my gosh, you're going live all the time and adding all this content into the group, and like, look at you. And she goes, no, I am not going live. I am recording it by myself and restarting a million times. And then look at you now. It's just been really fun. And we thought, you know what? People want to hear your story. Absolutely. But you have way more to say than that. You've got a lot to say about the healing journey, a lot to say about advocacy, a lot to say about how to protect children. And we thought, let's start a podcast so we can give not only the platform for people to learn, but you a platform to share what you've learned.
Man, and if you can think back, like when we first started episodes 1, 2, 3, like I have basically healed as we've done these podcasts, and it's almost been like a sneak peek into my healing, because 2 years ago, I'm not the same person now that I was then. And the drastic change that God has done in me, just thinking back to all the different podcasts and all the different things that we've done throughout these 100 weeks, it's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, you're right. The first couple episodes, I bet if we went back to watch, we would notice fear in you.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Me being more careful about what I say, and am I saying it the right way, and worried, and fear.
Living in fear.
Yeah.
And throughout these last 100 episodes, not only have we been able to connect with survivors, but we've also connected with opportunities to share your story and speak and connect with safe houses. And we just went to Delaware and spoke in front of a room, like standing room only. They had to shoo people away because of the fire code to hear your story in front of police officers and attorneys. So before we dive into today's episode, I'd love for you to give a little recap on how that was for you.
It was kind of surreal. I mean, there were years where there was just so much shame wrapped around my story, and confusion. And just the feeling of, it was too heavy. It was too much. It wasn't something that needed to be discussed. It needs to be swept under the rug. Whether it was that way actually or not, that's how I felt. And now I'm standing in front of people, judges even. There were 2 judges there. And them coming up to me and shaking my hand afterwards and saying it was an honor to hear your story. What? Like they needed more books because my books flew off the table, and people wanted to learn and understand because they care. And I remember years ago, me just being so blown away by Granny and her love for me and her care for my story and getting me free, and her saying to me, Rachel, there's people out there who want to understand, who want to learn, and who want to, be a part of something like this. And I couldn't hardly believe that. It just didn't even fit into my brain at that point. But now I'm living it, and I'm getting to meet people on a daily basis who want to understand because they care. And that's what we experienced as we traveled to Delaware and Pennsylvania. And I remember one lady stopping us and saying, I just love your podcast. I turn it on and it's in the background almost all day long. Really? That's incredible. But that's just the power of God. And so it was surreal, to say the least.
So one moment I'll share is Rachel's done sharing her story, and she has included pictures and journal entries, and it's just an emotional journey to go on with her. And as if you haven't read her book, Open Blind Eyes, grab that as well, because it's powerful to know her story and then also be able to see her here. And so when they're hearing her story, but then also seeing the eloquent way she speaks, her confidence, her demeanor, you know, she's still here and sharing well. And so the one person raised their hand in the audience and said, have you ever shared the story to the police in your area? Because I bet he said, I bet there's people in this room, police or attorneys, who would want to come and bat for you and would do something to help. And Rachel said, this is the first time I've ever spoke in front of police officers before. And they clapped.
Yeah.
That was super special.
Sweet.
That was super special.
Yes.
So thank you to those who are listening. Thank you to those who continue to listen each and every week, who are curious on what's going on in the STOPSIS world, who partner with us as either a speaking engagement or becoming a granny and supporting survivors, or we just did a retreat and we had wonderful ladies help us with food. And so we just want to say thank you to all of you who've listened, who've supported, who've invited us. You are what make this possible. And because of that, we are going to do a super fun Stop SIS giveaway for our 100th episode. In order to enter to win, we'd love for you to like this video and comment below if you're on YouTube. If you are on the podcast, then leave a review. And what we'll do is we're going to draw at least one winner to win the Stop SIS bundle, which will include Open Blind Eyes, and then a Dream Life workbook and Dream Life journal, as well as one of our new cool t-shirts.
Yeah. I mean, it's a amazing bundle. We have Mother's Day coming up, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So be entered to win. If you've already read Rachel's book, then you can gift it for sure. But we'll reach out to somebody after next week. We'll let it go for a week, and then we'll draw a name. And so what you'll need to do if you leave a comment is to put a way to get a hold of you. So an email address, or we'll reply underneath it and ask for your email address, something like that. One thing to know, if you put your email address, I would put a space between the @ like you don't have to put a .com, like don't make it a real link is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing, but it seems like that would be a thing. Okay. So in our recent trip to Delaware, we went to Pennsylvania for 2 stops. One was with our friend Amy. She's a fellow Dream Life coach. She hosted at our church. She had the police sergeant there as well, which was really special. And then the second event we did is with our friend Jimmy Hinton, who is a pastor at a local church in Pennsylvania. And he helped put on an event where Rachel spoke, and then we did a panel afterwards. If you have not listened to Jimmy Hinton's story, we'll tag that in the description box. Be sure to listen to his full story. We'll give you a little bit of an overview right now, but it is one of our most watched podcasts. So be sure to get the full details. But he gifted us his book. It's called The Devil Inside: How My Minister Father Molested Kids in Our Home and Church for Decades, and How I Finally Stopped Him. And so Rachel read this book over the last week and has highlighted a bunch of parts that we're going to talk through today. So I know you're not going to go over his whole story. We'll invite people to listen to the full episode, but can you give a couple sentence overview?
Yeah. So basically, after his dad had stepped away as minister for about, I think he was close to 30 years, Jimmy then filled the pulpit. And mind you, Jimmy's father was like his hero. Jimmy looked up to him, wanted to be just like him, wanted to be a pastor because of his father. Well, then one day, Jimmy's younger sister came to him and exposed the fact that their father had been molesting her since she was little. And Jimmy and his mother made the quick decision to go straight to the police. And that's that's uncommon. Like, people usually are like, how do we take care of this without getting law involved or making this a big deal? Like, we don't want people to know the shame maybe that would come on the family, all of that.
Or maybe just the disbelief. Like, I think a natural inclination would be to go to that person and say, is this true? What's going on here? And of course they would deny it, and you just leads you in circles. So I love the fact that they went straight to the police and let the police do the investigation.
Yep. And he did. He went to the police and they gave them all of the information, and they took the father in for questioning, and he admitted to, I believe, over a dozen victims from within his family as well as from within his church. As time has gone on and as Jimmy has had the opportunity to talk to more and more people, he has come to believe that that number is probably more likely over 100 as far as victims go. And this book, it goes into the process of how all of that took place. It talks about Jimmy's upbringing and how wonderful his upbringing was. It talks about the moment when, his world shattered and he found out the truth about his father. He realized all the suffering that his sisters had gone through, as well as his church family behind the scenes. But then here he is left to pick up the pieces, to lead a church who is now broken and in shock, to lead his family. And what do we do with this situation? He had to do things like his mom and dad had been separated for about 4 years. And so his dad had his own apartment for a time. And so when his dad did get arrested and taken into prison, him and his brothers were called and they had to clean out the apartment ASAP. Well, they found what was called boo-boo bags, and his father kept them from each of his victims as a keepsake of the things to help him remember. Just sick things that they came across. And another reminder of the person that the devil inside that they didn't realize was in their father. So just the different difficult steps that Jimmy had to walk through. But the neat piece that I think he took away from this that is unique in, a lot of people don't get this opportunity, is Jimmy has been able to go into the prison and have conversations with his father and to learn what the mind of a perpetrator is like, to understand better how they operate so that we can protect ourselves and our children better. And so the back half of this book is the things that Jimmy has learned as a result of talking to his pedophile father.
All right. So into the mind of a pedophile, literally. Let's hear what he has to say. What chapters are you on?
Okay, so the pieces that I really wanted to focus on, because I highlighted it like crazy, was chapters 11 and 12. And the first piece of it is he's talking a lot about wolves in sheep's clothing and the deceit. And I think that is one of the things, like after I read Jimmy's book, I then dug into scripture and was really looking up a lot about wolves in sheep's clothing and what makes a wolf versus what makes a sheep that has just gone astray. And I think the big difference is the deceit. That deceit we learn, is Satan himself. He is the master of deceit. And typically these pedophiles are going to be somebody that you least likely are to assume would hurt because of the deceitful nature of the way that they interact with people. And so he actually point blank talks a lot about the church and how the church is one of the most unsafe places for victims because of the grace upon grace upon grace, allowing perpetrators to have second, third, fourth chances, assuming the best in people. And so here's some of the things that I highlighted. He said we must increase the ability to quickly identify counterfeit people so we can either intervene or flee. Playing nice with deceivers and giving second chances to serial abusers who infiltrate the religious community is exactly why there is an epidemic of abuse in the church today. He said, make no mistake, Jesus was regularly training his disciples to see evil permeating from people bent on harm who, on the outside, looked like godly people, but inwardly were wolves. And then he talks about how upon learning that his dad had abused some of his victims inside the church building, he realized how unequipped he was to understand how this could even happen in the first place. Again, rather than getting hung up on why God allowed this to happen, he shifted his focus on understanding how. He said, my dad had slithered his way into every facet of innocent people's lives and had bitten time and time again. So then he started to ask his dad questions like, how did you do it? How did you know that victims wouldn't tell on you? How did you know which kids were more vulnerable than others? How did you know their parents wouldn't catch on? And question after question. And
one thing I'll just add is that that's exactly what the book Duck, Duck, Groom says too. They say, why is not the right question to ask? The question, because there is no good reason. You're not going to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. And so evil doesn't make sense. And so instead of focusing your attention on why, asking how, and really learning the signs is a better way to spend energy.
Yeah, exactly. He talked about Larry Nassar. Is that how you say his last name?
Mm-hmm.
He is the U.S. Olympic doctor, and basically how he sexually abused nearly all of his hundreds of victims with one or both of their parents in the same room as he molested them. And he began to understand that Nassar's techniques was that he was using these casual conversations with the parents as a tool to distract them as he actually hurt his victims in the process. And it was literally right in front of the parents. And that's what he began to learn that his dad was doing as well.
What can you describe that? What do you mean? Do you mean that he's building trust with the parents, or you mean he's actually hurting them? What I heard about his story, because he's in Michigan, he was at Michigan State, from what I understand, is that he would be doing an adjustment with like a physical therapy kind of adjustment with the ladies, and they'd be laying down on a bench or whatever it is. And he would molest them there while seemingly doing an adjustment type experience. And so the mom or dad would be sitting in the room or right outside the room for this appointment and then eventually he would have the girls come to his house for this adjustment. So I guess that was my question. When you say he's in front of the parents, that was how I was understood that it went down.
Yeah. So Jimmy had read this book called Sleights of Mind. And he said it helped him understand a little bit better how basically they can target not just the kids, but also the parents who would be quick to trust and who would be more willing to let things slide because they trust the person so much. And basically in the next chapter, it talks about testing versus grooming and how he would start small. And if the parents let things go or weren't really paying attention, then he would be able to continue the abuse and be more bold with it to where he was literally doing it right in front of them. And, they just thought this was all normal.
Right. So it reminds me of grooming the child, but the grooming of the parents and testing.
Yeah.
That's fascinating and horrifying at the same time.
Yeah. So, Jimmy's asking his dad all of these questions. And he says, until we experience something like this firsthand, it seems completely unbelievable that the same person who we love, admire, and trust could also be capable of deceiving and betraying us on such a deep level right in front of our eyes. But they do, and they get more and more brazen as their skills progress. Abusers live and breathe deception. Their minds never shut off. So here now he's going to share an excerpt from his dad. And trigger warning to people listening, because it is bone chilling. At least it was.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 109. He says, this excerpt from a letter my dad sent me from prison was an exchange we had about abuse in plain sight and how he was able to molest his victims in front of their parents. I asked him if he was ever afraid of getting caught. After a lengthy step-by-step description of how he was able to digitally penetrate his victims in front of their parents, this is what he said about getting caught. That alone, caressing the child's genitals in front of their parents, is enough for a pedophile to be arrested, yet almost impossible to prove, as one, the parents don't really think it happened with a trusted individual, and they don't want to falsely accuse or break up a friendship or relationship. Two, the children are not aware that something really bad happened, and it would be very unlikely to mention it to the parents. And three, if it all comes out, how would you prove any of it? So nothing happens except the pedophile is now emboldened to explore more brazen abuses and win the acceptance and trust and secrecy of the child. The parents are becoming convinced this perp and their child are a fun and safe match to be trusted together. Not good. Jimmy, I hope this doesn't make you overly sick to your stomach. It does me because I've lived it my whole adult life.
So I'm guessing his dad never, once you're a pedophile, you're a pedophile. Like, he's in prison now. He's not like remorseful, is my guess. Like, is he just saying this is how my brain works?
Yeah, this is how he got away with it, and is very brazen about it. And like Jimmy goes on to talk about how these perpetrators know so much about us, that they pay very close attention to each parent and how they interact with their kids, or just watching mannerisms, so that they know who they can attack. And yet the rest of us are so consumed with our own things that we're not having eyes open to see perpetrators. Their eyes are honed in on us, but we're, let's see the good in everybody.
Right. I think too, we've heard stories at events where people were like, did I just see that? Did I see that? Is that what I saw?
Right.
And then, so even if they did notice something awkward, it can be easily dismissed because it's with a pastor and it's with a trusted adult and he would never, or maybe I just misjudged something or missaw something, or so I can see how what he laid out is accurate. And he could get away with doing it a lot.
Yeah, which is sickening. And Jimmy gives, tips on how to keep your eyes open with adults who are handsy with kids right in front of you. If they're accidentally, quote unquote, touching your child, goofily tickling, caressing their hair, whatever, that's a red flag. Now, you're not saying point blank they're a pedophile, but they're not a safe person to be around your kid. If they're doing this right in front of you, not only does that mess with the child's mind, but you're possibly giving this guy permission to keep going in an unknowing way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Wow.
So the next chapter is testing versus grooming. And this is chapter 12. And I talk a lot about grooming because I felt like my coach groomed me into trusting him, and felt like he had groomed the community. And I do believe he did, but at the same time, Jimmy makes a lot of sense when he says certain people with certain positions don't have to groom the community. People just automatically assume they're good, like a teacher or an elder of a church. You don't have to do much. You don't have to waste a ton of energy in grooming. People are going to automatically assume you're a safe individual if you hold those titles. But the testing piece was interesting to me, because if you think about it, my coach was doing slow, like putting a frog in lukewarm water and turning the boiling water up. He, would get me out of class. He would give me all of this special attention and see what my reaction was. My parents, I'm sure, never went to him like, why are you pulling my daughter out of class? Like, there was never that type of interaction So again, he felt more safe to continue doing what he was doing. Then came the accidental touch, and seeing my reaction with that and seeing me believe that it was an accident. Just slowly testing me, and I believe slowly testing my parents to see just how far he could go. And I think he did that with hundreds of girls. And some passed the test to where he could go further, and some didn't. And some, he, for whatever reason, he saw as not even approachable and trying anything with. And that's what I think is important for us to understand, so that we can be those unapproachable people to pedophiles.
Yeah, when we talk to parents, I think that's one of the things we can control is, are we paying attention to what our kids are doing? Are we paying attention to who's around them? Are we paying attention? The more that we are involved, hopefully that's a red flag to pedophiles.
Yeah. Agreed. So I think this story is, again, bone chilling. It's actually written by a father whose children were sexually abused by Jimmy's father. And this guy explains how he hadn't been to church in a while. And
so this part isn't from Jimmy's dad?
This is written by a father of his kids were sexually abused by him.
Okay. So this is a victim's father that's writing this portion. Okay, got it.
Yes, on page 116.
Okay.
He says, I hadn't been to church in years. I decided it was time to take my kids to church and reconnect with God. Your dad spotted me from across the sanctuary and beelined over to me. He was the first person to talk to me. There was an immediate connection, and looking back, he was finding out all kinds of personal information about me and my kids, and I never questioned it. Is there a Mrs. Smith? Isn't it overwhelming being a single father? Tell me about your beautiful children. Your dad got so much information from me so quickly, and everything he said made perfect sense. I really connected with your dad. That same day, your dad suggested that he become a spiritual mentor to me, and I gladly accepted. He knew that I would accept it based on the information I'd given him about wishing I had someone in my life to help guide me. I was desperate to connect with God, and everyone told me that what a great man your dad was. And what's interesting then, if you go a little bit further down, it says, this is how the vast majority of child sexual predators work. It's all about technique. My dad walked into a room of 200 or so people that day, and within literal seconds, spotted his targets without ever saying a word to them. From there, he approached the dad, tested him and the kids, and within days was sexually abusing the children. Like,
wow. Well, I do think that this raises a good point. Sometimes we think grooming might take a while, right? They build the trust, but it doesn't have to when that trust is immediate. It's already there. Mm-hmm. The dad and the kids most likely trusted quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And within days.
And what's so infuriating to me, and and I know it is for God too, is that he's using God as a way to get people to trust him, and then he uses it to hurt. And it makes me furious.
Yeah, that's very scary. Wow. Anything else in this chapter that stood out to you?
Yeah, so I want to add a little bit about what then the dad said about all of this. He said, I was always...
Hold on. Which dad?
So Jimmy's dad.
Jimmy's dad. Okay, back to Jimmy's dad. Got it.
Yeah, he said, I was always testing both the kids and their parents. It was always a bonus if you could test the parents and kids together at the same time. I did all kinds of tests with the kids and parents at the same time. Putting a hand on a kid's butt was one of the most powerful and common ways to test them. It could be a piggyback ride or a reassuring pat while a kid sits beside you at church. It doesn't really matter. The goal is to touch an area that is quote unquote off limits and see how the child and parents respond. If they've told their kid that nobody is supposed to touch you where a bathing suit goes, once I've touched their butt, I have violated that. At the same time, I made it so natural that the kid isn't weirded out by it and the parent thinks it's innocent and doesn't care.
Wow.
So we're getting a little bit of like the beginning stages of some absolute terrible, I mean, because this man goes on to rape children. And we're getting that just beginning piece of how he tricks parents and children and tests them to where he then gets the opportunity to unfortunately hurt them in that way. And I just think it's so eye-opening and important for us to hear this so that we can protect our kids and have our eyes open.
It is another reminder to me that a pedophile's brain is just different. Like they're always, it feels exhausting to try to be putting on a show like this so much, but it's who they are, which is why we say pedophiles never have just one victim. Right. Who they are is deceitful, manipulative, and often violent.
Yeah. But but we're not always going to see that when we're facing them, at church or whatever. It's going to seem like a fun, goofy guy. And I don't want people going around and making like false accusations on people who, are not truly abusing. But you can make a point of keeping your kids away from somebody who is handsy, because it's a red flag. Mm-hmm. And really, any normal human being would understand that.
What else did Jimmy's dad say in terms of rehabilitation, or was there anything about like that he hopes to change or that he is remorseful at all? Or
my understanding is that eventually Jimmy had to stop because it was too sick to even have these conversations with his dad. And I don't believe he has even visited with him or talked with him in quite a while. So I don't know where his dad's at with rehab. And but just listening to these letters and hearing him explain it all, he sounds just as sick as ever.
Right. Yeah. Well, and as we know, I don't know that rehabilitation when your brain is that warped is possible. But I would just be interested to know if he knows that or if he thinks this is fine.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think that part of the rehabilitation, though, is like recognizing you have a problem. So who knows but they're also hiding it. They're not doing it in plain sight. So they do know that it's not healthy, or
that deception piece.
Yeah.
Is what I feel like really takes somebody from a sheep to a wolf.
Yeah.
And as opposed to like, somebody who's having trouble with addictions of sorts or whatever, like that's different versus somebody who's deceptively twisting God's word to abuse and hurt a child,
And so he got how many years did you say in prison?
I'm not sure. I want to say 20, but I don't know where I got that from.
Okay. And I remember it being like, yeah, he's not getting out.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is rare for these types of cases. So they must have had a lot of evidence.
They had a lot of evidence. I think he admitted to a lot of things as well. And then according to the officer or the investigator to all of this, they told Jimmy that this is one of the worst cases that they had seen.
Wow.
So
we might need to have Jimmy on to talk about how he helped to heal the community, because you think you go back to the congregation who has been blindsided by this, or victims potentially, and how, I would be interested to hear how the congregation reacted and how he was able to support them in that process.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. We should definitely have him back on. He does talk about that quite a bit in the book as well.
Okay.
I feel like every church leader needs to read this book.
The Devil Inside by Jimmy Hinton.
Yeah. Every church leader, I would recommend every parent. It just has some nuggets in it that are priceless to understanding to keep your kids safe. Another story that I wanted to share real quick was on page 120. And this was a situation where Jimmy was, I think, visiting a different church. And a man approached him and his daughter. And just to see how Jimmy handles it, I thought was really eye-opening. He said, when my oldest daughter was 3 years old, we visited a church. I was walking through the church foyer when an older man stopped me. He started talking to my daughter and tried to tickle her under her armpits. I pulled her away before his finger could touch her. I asked him to stop and said that neither of us liked that he was trying to tickle her. He ignored me and attempted again to tickle her. I pulled away and didn't allow him to make contact. He gave up on trying to tickle her and then said that my daughter was beautiful. He said her cheeks and eyes were very pretty and that she'd be a heartbreaker one day. He said this about a 3-year-old toddler. At that point, I'd had enough. I said loud enough for people around us to hear, "Let's get you away from this creepy man who doesn't take no for an answer."
Ooh.
And he says, maybe he was an abuser, maybe he wasn't, but I wasn't going to stay near him long enough to find out.
Right.
Period. I think that's fantastic. And, we're scared to hurt people's feelings at times. And I'm speaking from my own experience, but
it's helpful to have the words to say, because I think we're often in shock, and we're like, and so to have the words, no, thank you. And that's why we practice, right? No, thank you. I don't want you to, don't tickle us, please. Or, and then to say that loud enough for the people around to hear. Priceless.
Yeah, it is. And, his daughter was protected that day. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we will link Jimmy's book, The Devil Inside, in the show notes and description box as well. And if you are a leader in any way, you need to know how his dad got away with molesting children in plain sight for 30 years. Yes. I think getting into the mind of someone like that is fascinating. That's the psychology that people are always asking, like, how can this happen? Why does this happen? And he asks his dad all of those hard questions. Anything else you want to add before we end today?
Well, I know Jimmy goes around and travels and speaks and trains law enforcement. He trains churches on how to keep their congregation safe. I would highly recommend having him come and speak at any of your events. He has unfortunately been through hell and back, but he's using it to help others. And I think it's remarkable. I just think you can see God all throughout it, taking a terrible situation and turning it for good.
Yeah. And I always say, like, our mama bear comes out. I would say his papa bear comes out.
100%.
You can see him feisty. He cares about this issue. And so when he trains churches and speaks to leadership, he's very clear and very supportive on what they need to do to keep their congregation safe.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll put his link in the description box below. Feel free to reach out to him and have him come and share. And hey, maybe we could do a collab. Stop Sis and Jimmy could do a little tour. That would be fun.
Hey, he's on our board now, so we totally should.
We should. We'll come up with a package deal, you guys. Well, Rachel, it's been an honor to sit down at the mic with you for 100 episodes. Thank you for adding value, for doing your research, for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And you guys, be sure to enter to win our Stop SIS giveaway. You'll get a t-shirt and several books, resources. And you do that by liking, commenting, leaving a review. And the more you do, the more entries you get. So we want to get the word out about how we educate and support survivors, and would love to add more people to our community.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, Denise.
Absolutely. Have an awesome day, you guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your event, workshop, school, church, or organization, then please email racheltimothy.stopsis@gmail.com. If you are interested in donating to the Stop SIS ministry, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below. or you can email STOPSIS@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence or you know somebody who is, then check out our website, stopsuffering.org, to learn more about our online programs and resources. We will always recommend that you also reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.